Because I don't know the details of that, but maybe he was invited and he didn't know what was going to happen. I don't know.
No, they asked. They asked if they could do this, and he said yes. Well, what's wrong with it? You gotta have a little fun. And he was part of it. So we.
But if he did it and if he knew, I'm not sure whether he knew, okay, but if he knew, it was a lapse in judgment. If he knew, okay, such things can happen. But I think that's not really the worst that has happened in the church. Okay, we have to look at it from that sense. Okay, it could be bad, poor judgments away here and there, because we all have that kind of poor judgment sometimes. That's why we are sinners. And when you are a leader, then it does more damage.
Yeah, and I was asked,
that poor judgment.
Confronted. I said, how can that?
But always your answer should be when something is way out of what it means to be a Catholic. Your answer should be, that's not church. Okay, that's not what we stand for. Okay, with this child abuse thing, people, even sensible people, why don't they defensive? Okay, I don't have to defend a child abuser. That's not what I stand for. He is not Catholic. He doesn't represent me. What the church does every day is to teach children, like in our schools. In our CCD program here has over, I think, 1,500 kids. That's who we are as Catholics. There's no child abuse taking place in our school here. 1,500 kids. I haven't heard any child abuse. That is Catholic. Now, if, for example, one bad apple happens to come in and abuses one child, that's what you will hear about the Catholic Church. You don't hear about the Catholic Church with Sylvia every day of the week, teaching kids here. 1,500. We have a group of 100 catechists here. You are one of them. Okay? Teaching CCD. Why would a man like that or an example like that make you lose sight of the goodness you do every day? That's where we go wrong. And we get on the defensive because they saw these things, unfortunately, because of human sin, human stubbornness, moral weakness, we minimize them, but they're going to happen. But when they happen, they are not the church. You are not being church, you're not being a Christian when you do that. So I don't have to defend it.
I just felt, for the first time, I felt pain for this cardinal. And all I wanted to do was just do a holy hour for him. That the Lord
But the thing is, probably, sometimes people are blindsided about certain things. But for me, like when I'm blindsided, I would speak up. Okay? You can't ambush me. But sometimes, some people may be ambushed and whatever. But also here in the West, the church is sometimes, maybe afraid of the media or public, backlash or whatever. I just don't know what they're afraid of. Sometimes I just don't get it. What they're afraid of. The church from the very beginning, the apostles died because they were opposing the Sanhedrin, the political establishment of the time. So the battle between Moses and Pharaoh, that's what we started with in this course. The battle between Moses and Pharaoh will be there until the end of time. It's like the battle between God and Satan. So we cannot be obsequious to evil, to the devil, his workings, simply we want to keep peace. There's no peace. When you give the devil a millimeter, an inch, the devil will break down a wall. So you don't give him an inch. Once there is a crack, he's going to burst everything open. So we shouldn't be afraid of addressing these things, and we should always be aware that there will be a backlash. It's called persecution. If we try to avoid that, we can't be church. It's that simple. Sometimes the priests freak out when they say something, and some people get up and leave in the pews. Sometimes you see people getting up and leave. And the priests become apologetic. People left, I didn't mean that. What did you mean? One time I was at St. Elizabeth. I think it was the Feast of the Holy Family, and I preached about family. And this priest was a visiting priest from somewhere, he was somewhere. And after Mass, he told me, you know, you can preach like that because you are not from here. You can let go of that because you are not an American, because you are not from here. I said, what do you mean? They're so afraid. Why would I be afraid of the truth? I'm not the source of it. One time when I was still in vocations, I went to one church and I was preaching about basically those churches and said, no, homosexual unions and whatever, they have no place in family life, as the church understands it. After Mass, one man, you know, came to me and I said, oh, I can't believe that kind of ignorance is still in the church. I said, what kind of ignorance? I said, what you preached about. I said, are you Catholic? He said, yes. I said, what do you believe? Do you believe what I've just said is Catholic? Well, that's it. I said, okay, if what I said is ignorance, tell me the sources of your wisdom. What is the source of your wisdom that would accept gay unions as okay in the Catholic Church? What is the source? Give me your sources of the Catholic faith, of Catholicism, that support your view and they call my truth, what I taught you, ignorance. He tried to walk away. I said, don't walk away, answer me. So I put him on the defensive and he ran away. He thought I would apologize. Why would I apologize for the truth? I also struggle to live it. It's not mine. It is God's. It doesn't mean that I'm an expert on living it. No, I fail, I sin. But I can't change it because I'm weak. It is the truth. We live by it. If we fail, we repent. Okay? We said, God, I'm sorry I failed. And we keep on trying. We can't falsify the truth simply because it's difficult to live by. So you should not be afraid of proclaiming the truth. You shouldn't be afraid of saying the truth into your families. Sometimes people gather on these, Thanksgiving and whatever, and they don't say anything about some of the things that are going on. Parents are afraid of their children to catechize them. Because I want to keep the peace. There can't be peace if there is no truth. It's that simple. We can keep a fake peace, but it's non-existent. It doesn't exist. And that's what Jesus told us, okay? Mother will turn against daughter, daughter against the mother-in-law, whatever, all those things, okay? He didn't preach division. He said some people will accept the truth, others will reject it. But that doesn't mean don't proclaim. In the Old Covenant, the prophet was sent by God. And he said, well, these people are so stubborn, they will not believe. You go. I know they are stubborn, they will not believe, but they will know that a prophet has been among them. And so they can't say, well, I didn't know. But if you fault and don't teach, then we are held accountable. It's not a digression because it's important. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 3.
Ezekiel what?
Chapter 3. Okay. Who would like to read? Chapter 3. The beginning of chapter 3.
I'll read it. It says,
That's 3 to 9 and then we'll jump, okay?
3,
to 9.
3 to 9.
No, chapter 3, beginning with verse 1.
Okay. He said to me, Son of man, eat what you find here, eat this scroll, then go, speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. Son of man, he said to me, feed your stomach and fill your belly with this scroll I am giving you. I ate it, and it was as sweet as honey in my mouth. Then he said to me, Son of man, go now to the house of Israel and speak my words to them. Not to a people with obscure speech and difficult language am I sending you, but to the house of Israel, nor to many nations of obscure speech and difficult language whose words you cannot understand. For if I were to send you to these, they would listen to you. But the house of Israel will refuse to listen to you, since they refuse to listen to me. For the whole house of Israel is stubborn of brow and hard of heart. Look, I think your face is hard as theirs, and your brow is stubborn as theirs. Like iron, harder than flint, I make your brow. Do not be afraid of them, or be terrified by their looks, for they are a rebellious house.
Okay?
What does that mean?
They are very stubborn, they are hearts of chaos. Okay?
Giving us a scroll to eat.
The scroll is the word of God.
Okay.
Eat the word of God because you're going to proclaim. So be filled with the word because you're going to proclaim. Then go to verse 17. But I would ask you to read the whole chapter, okay? But let's go to verse 17, okay? This is very important, okay? Okay. Verse 17, Son of man, I have appointed you a sentinel for the house of Israel. Now, this refers in a sense to all of us the baptized. So picture yourself in this. Don't say, well, those are priests only. By virtue of your baptism, what did you become?
Priest, prophet, king.
And so we are talking about now your prophetic mission. Don't say, well, that I have nothing to do with that. No. Son of man, I have appointed you sentinel for the house of Israel. When you hear a word from my mouth, you shall warn them from me. If you hear a word from my mouth, you shall warn my people. I want to save them from themselves, from self-destruction. Warning them. If you refuse, you will see what happens, okay? If I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you do not warn them or speak out to dissuade the wicked from their evil conduct in order to save their lives, then they shall die for their sin, okay? But I will hold you responsible for their blood. Because I sent you and you were afraid. You did not proclaim to them, you did not warn them for me. So, if we refuse to admonish our brothers and sisters falling into sin, we are sinning. It's a sin against charity. The devil has found a way in our day to hoodwink us, okay, to basically prevent us from doing this responsibility. The phrase is, don't judge anyone. God said you can't judge. When did he say that? How can you admonish? How can you warn if you can't make judgments? Yes.
If we are in a an environment where, let's just say, a friend of ours is not within the Catholic faith and they're practicing the homosexual life, and we do not warn them, are we living in sin?
You committed sin of omission. A grave sin of omission.
How do we not commit the sin of omission?
By
warning.
do exactly what you hear here.
Yeah, but how do,
As a baptized young man,
yes.
God sends you. You share in his prophetic mission to proclaim what he sent Jeremiah to proclaim. The truth. And if you are afraid of addressing the truth in circumstances that are clear to you, that are available to you, you are failing to warn God's people. and God will hold you. I'm not saying it, so.
I have a friend whose son is going to get married again next year. So he wants us to pray for him,
Yes.
not to. But how can you tell that person that you're not supposed to get married because you're gay? How can you say that?
You're not supposed to get married. You're not telling them they're not supposed to get married.
No, they are planning.
They're supposed to get married the right way.
But they want, that guy wants to get married to the.
What matters is not what I want. What matters is what God's will is. So if these people are not doing God's will, that is what basically some people critique the Pope for, and the Pope really didn't come out again to, to say something, to clarify. He was on a plane, and many people, he said, made a statement, but all we heard was, who am I to judge? Okay? And the Pope really, I think he heard about it, but he didn't come back to clarify. That was basically sound bite. The whole statement was, they asked him, well, gay marriage, about gay marriage. He said, if they're doing the will of God, who am I to judge? Because if they're doing the will of God, they're doing right. So what those people are going to do is not the will of God.
So
You may have the orientation, but do the will of God. The will of God is practice chastity. It's that simple. Okay? It's not what I want. I may want to have 10, 20 wives. Solomon had 700. Okay? It's not what I want. Okay? That's why our will has to be conformed to the will of God. Otherwise, this tendency is very prevalent not only among the young, but even among our parents, okay? That you do whatever you want. What you want is really God's will. So you tell God what you want and God will rubber stamp it. No. If your child is asking you for a snake, you don't give them a snake. Okay? You don't give them a scorpion because they want it. Okay?
So we cannot do anything if they plan already to get married.
It doesn't matter what their plans are. Okay? What she said is right. Pray for them.
Yeah.
That they may not go down that path.
pray for them like that.
Okay? And if there are people who are close to them, warn them. This is the word of God. Warn them. If they reject, listen to the whole thing. Okay? Let's read the whole thing. If I said to the wicked, okay, you shall surely die, and you do not warn them or speak out to dissuade the wicked from their evil conduct in order to save their lives, then they shall die for their sin. But I will hold you responsible for their blood. If, however, you warn the wicked, and they still do not turn from their wickedness and evil conduct, they shall die for their sin, but you shall save your life, because you did your responsibility. But if the just man turn away from their right conduct and do evil, when I place a stumbling block before them, then they shall die, meaning your temptation. Even if you warn them about their sin, they shall still die, and the just deeds that they performed will not be remembered on their behalf, like if a person falls away from the faith. I will, however, hold you responsible for their blood. If, on the other hand, you warn the just to avoid sin, and they do not sin, they will surely live, because of the warning, and you, in turn, shall save your own life. Okay? So,
I have a question.
Today we have a bad attitude. Don't judge anyone. If we can't judge anyone, the church should get out of the business of teaching. Because Christian teaching is a judgment about good, evil, right, wrong, and so on and so forth. Okay, and that's what Christ came for. So remember we talked about this earlier, okay? But it's very important to understand this distinction. Because you'll hear people say, don't judge me. And the Christians really fall into the trap and say, no, I'm not judging you. Then shut up. If you're not judging me, okay? I'm judging you. Yes, I am. I'm doing it. Okay?
Yeah,
So,
just say yes.
but what kind of judgment that we're making? Okay? So we have to make sure that our judgment is not pharisaic, hypocritical. Okay? There was you know this story very well, adults. There was a president who was being impeached for committing adultery. Okay? And the man who led the charge in Congress was the Speaker of the House. And as he was impeaching the other guy for adultery, he himself was committing adultery during that time.
Oh, I know.
They were in Washington. So the man who led the charge to impeach the other one for adultery was committing adultery
Yeah.
during that same period, concurrently as you impeach the other. So we must avoid that kind of hypocrisy. Okay? But we must know that in order to correct someone, I don't have to be perfect first. Because we're in this together. Okay? What do? We encourage one another. We admonish one another. Okay? Admonish one another. That is Colossians chapter 3, verse 16. Admonish one another. We are in this together. I'm not perfect first in order to admonish you. So the kind of judgment we must understand is this. There's what we call the judgment of condemnation, a condemnatory judgment. This we must never make. So I cannot tell you that I saw you doing evil things, okay? You're going to go to hell. You're done. Hell. Beyond redemption, Don't pray for him. He's not there. I can't do that. I'm not God. I don't hold the keys to heaven or hell. Yeah? Okay. So we can't condemn. Okay. Number 2 is called a rush to judgment. A rush judgment. A rush to judgment. Okay. A rush to judgment is a judgment I make when I don't even know the facts. I just see a situation and make a judgment. A false judgment. For example, I see a lady I know here, okay? I happen to be walking on the street at 2 a.m. in the morning. And I see a girl I know, she comes to church. And then I see her at 2 a.m. also walking by. And I go, wow, I didn't know she's a prostitute. How do you know? She didn't come to you, she didn't go, she's just walking by. So that's called a rush to judgment. You don't know why she's there. Okay? So we should not make such judgments, but we make these judgments a lot. That's why we should confess them. Because it is wrong, okay, to judge people like that. You don't know the facts. And you're alleging. This is the driving force of gossip. A rush to judgment. Some of us think that we're very intelligent, like I think maybe we'll call them ourselves, natural psychics. So we know why people are doing this. We know why they are there. We know why. We just know. But how do you know? Presumption. We presume a lot that we know this and that. We don't know. Okay? So that's the rush to judgment. Number 3 is the kind of judgment we must do. Not only that we must do, it's our obligation. That's what we read in Ezekiel chapter 3. It's called biblically ad. Or a corrective judgment. This is our obligation to correct one another, admonish one another. If we don't do it, we sin. So should we judge people?
Yeah.
Yes. Not in this sense, but in this sense for our salvation and their salvation. Okay. Yes, sir.
So, back to the Pope. Do you think that the way that the Pope answered the question was honest?
Yes, it
And
was.
is that an appropriate style for a Catholic to adopt when addressing very delicate questions like that for?
No, basically, it was in a long conversation. But what he said, okay, usually, I think sometimes there is precision of language required, okay. So
Especially the Pope.
yes, there must may not have been, but you can't say who am I to judge, okay. But basically, what he was saying in a sense, that's why we study theology.
Yes.
We need to be precise in theology. What he was saying is like this kind of judgment, okay? That they are doing the will of God. So if they're doing the will of God, okay? So St. Augustine said, love and do what you want. Love and do what you will. Because love cannot go wrong. So if these men are doing the will of God, it means they are doing good. So they're not going to engage in evil acts.
But when he's addressing homosexuality, is that an appropriate response, or is that just kind of convoluting it so he doesn't have to be political and make?
Well, can't really get. I don't know what he was thinking at the time.
Okay.
But the statement he made was, if they're doing the will of God. But if they're doing the will of God was cut from it, and they simply said, who am I to judge?
So it was kind of like an additive diversion from the original question.
No, it wasn't diverting. It wasn't really diverting, okay? In the context of the question, because it was a long discussion, what he was saying on the plane. But all we had was the pest, cut and pest. The Pope said, who am I to judge? Getting into the wider false narrative that we can't judge anyone. So for us, we must know, indeed we can judge, but also it is our responsibility to judge. Not in these two senses which are sinful, in this sense which is salvific. We call this a salvific judgment, admonition, okay? Correcting.
It sounds like he uses more redirective judgment, so as not to be cornered into something that could be politically embarrassing.
No, basically the Pope has said so many things, okay? Sometimes that's why I want us to read the Vatican website. He said about many things about these alternative family styles, okay? He said so many things which are very clear. Go look it up what he said about what they call them, what kind of families? Basically addressing this transgenderism and that kind of thing. He has addressed it.
Father, can you put the website? What was the name of the website?
Vatican website.
Oh, the Vatican
The
website.
Vatican. Those are the trusted websites. Vatican website or EWTN website. Other websites you have to be very careful. Those are at least the two I know. Okay?
The Holy See.
If the Holy See, that's the Vatican website. It's the Holy See. The Holy See.
The Pope, they told me that the last week, like, they got me into like from a park place or a rock or something, that I didn't know what to say. Because the Pope said that it's okay to be a homosexual. I said, no, it isn't.
No.
It isn't. But he said that they were born like that.
He didn't say they were born like that.
That's what they told me. And that's what
So
I-
that's why we have to see what the Pope said, okay? You see, it doesn't, the church doesn't get into that whether they were born. The church in the catechism here, it says that the psychological origin of these things hasn't been well understood, okay? But the church states her teaching very clear.
I had seen this, I had seen like two little boys grow up, and they were from this little boy was 2 years old, and his father beat him up really bad because he was always trying to play with dolls and pray and has his little purse and all that. His father would beat him really bad.
Yeah, but sometimes, a 2-year-old really doesn't have any sexual feeling, so you can.
But Father, he's still a homosexual.
Yeah, but a 2-year-old.
He's 20 something years old.
Yeah, but you can't say that he was born at 2 years old, he was showing, sexual orientation, because a 2-year-old doesn't have sexual feeling. Okay, so it's practically different.
Well, I
Okay.
I know that one.
Okay, so basically we were saying about the cosmic liturgy, Christ the rising sun, and so our praying is inserted into the procession of the nations to God. Remember the promise made to Abraham by God, all nations will be blessed in you. And so we know later on the descendant of Abraham, Jesus Christ comes, and all the nations are blessed in him. So all the nations are processing toward God. So, but what about the altar? What's the significance of the altar in our churches? So in what direction should we pray during the Eucharistic liturgy? In the Byzantine church buildings, the structure of praying just described was by and large retained, meaning facing east. Byzantine churches are Catholic churches. They are different from Greek Orthodox churches, which are not Catholic. Okay, so you know the distinction. When it's at the Byzantine Rite, it is Catholic. Greek Orthodox is not Catholic. So, but in Rome, a somewhat different arrangement developed. So the bishop's chair was shifted to the center of the apse, and so the altar was moved into the nave. This seems to have been the case in the Lateran Basilica and in St. Mary Major's well into the 9th century. These are the basilicas in Rome. However, in St. Peter's, during the pontificate of St. Gregory the Great, in the 4th century, the altar was moved nearer to the bishop's chair, probably for the simple reason that he was supposed to stand as much as possible above the tomb of St. Peter. This was when you go to Rome, St. Peter's, the tomb of Peter is there. They discovered it because of ancient graffiti. Ancient graffiti. It's amazing. In our English language, graffiti means something bad, but in Italian it simply means art, photograph. Okay. So this was an outward and a visible expression of the truth that we celebrate the sacrifice of the Lord in the communion of saints. So during that time it was very common to erect altars over tombs of saints. How better can you do it? Okay? So these were martyrs who died for the faith. They shed their blood for Christ. And so we are offering the same sacrifice. We made them saints. And so you erect a tomb and rather an altar at the tomb of a saint. So the sacrifice of the Lord in the communion of saints, a communion spanning all times and ages. So the custom of erecting an altar above the tombs of the martyrs probably goes back a long way and is an outcome of the same motivation. Throughout history, the martyrs continue Christ's self-oblation. They are like the church's living altar, made not of stone, but of men and women who have become members of the body of Christ, and thus express a new kind of cultus, worship. Sacrifice is humanity becoming one with Christ. So the ordering of St. Peter's was then copied, so it would seem, in many other stational churches in Rome. Then another innovation. Because of the topological circumstances, it turned out that St. Peter's faced west. Because of the topology of Rome, St. Peter's didn't face east. It faced west. This is significant. Okay? Thus, if the celebrating priest wanted, as the Christian tradition of prayer demands, to face east, he had to stand behind the people and look. This is the logical conclusion toward the people. So St. Peter's is facing east. So if you are a priest, you want to face east, you would be standing behind the people. So but the altar is over here, so you face east. But seemingly facing east, you are now seemingly facing the people. But the actual fact, it wasn't facing the people. It was orienting the prayer east. Okay? So that's how St. Peter's was basically built. So whatever reason it was done, one can also see this arrangement in a whole series of church buildings within St. Peter's direct sphere of influence. So basically, other churches started copying what was happening in St. Peter's. The liturgical renewal in the last century took up this alleged model and developed from it a new idea for the form of the liturgy. The Eucharist, so it was said, had to be celebrated versus populum, meaning toward the people. The altar, as can be seen in the normative model of St. Peter's, had to be positioned in such a way that priest and people looked at each other and formed together the circle of the celebrating community. So these were naive reformers or deformers in the late 50s and early 60s during Vatican II, all the way through the 70s. They said that the way the church celebrated Mass before was that the priest was turning his back on the people, okay? And he was facing the wall. Those were their allegations, which is totally, completely wrong. The priest and the people were facing east, the cross, welcoming Christ, the rising sun. The priest didn't turn his back, okay, the people. All he did wasn't facing the wall. Okay? So many priests and many religious lied to people. So that now the priest is facing the people. But in St. Peter's, the priest was not actually facing the people. The priest was facing east. But seemingly facing east would mean that he was facing, in a sense, the people. Okay. So this alone, so it was said, was compatible with the meaning of the Christian liturgy, with the requirement of active participation. And we're going to see the meaning of active participation later, which is totally mixed in many circles today. Okay? This alone conformed to the primordial model of the Last Supper. So they would allege, those naive reformers, okay, that what we are celebrating now, priest facing people and people facing priest, was actually what happened at the Last Supper, which is not true at all. Because that's not what happened at the Last Supper. Maybe Father's Last Supper, but not the Last Supper of Jesus Christ. Okay? So these arguments seemed in the end so persuasive that after the council, which says nothing about turning toward the people, the council never said anything about that. Okay? The council didn't say anything about turning toward the people. We said nothing about people. New altars were set up everywhere. And today, celebration versus people toward the people really does look like the characteristic fruit of Vatican II's liturgical renewal, which in actual fact it's not. Because Vatican II said nothing about it. So in fact, it is the most conspicuous consequence of a reordering that not only signifies a new external arrangement of the places dedicated to the liturgy, but also bring with it a new idea of the essence of the liturgy as a communal meal. The liturgy is not a communal meal. It's not a meal. If you want a good meal, a communal good meal, you go to Pollo Inca. The meals there are far much better than the Eucharist, if you're looking for a good meal. Okay? So simple understanding, the Eucharist as a meal is a meal. Okay? What a poor meal. No matter the way, the Eucharist had never been referred to as a meal until the 16th century by the deformers. You can look all through the church history. For 1500 years, it was never called like simply a meal. Okay. That came with the so-called Protestant Revolution. Okay? And so, this is of course a misunderstanding.
Sorry, Father. The father machine is right here. Is somebody parking in your place? And he needs to move your car. Thank you so much.
We got her.
Sorry about that.
We got you. Okay, so this of course, this is a misunderstanding of the significance of the Roman Basilica and the positioning of its altar. And the representation of the Last Supper is also inaccurate. The idea that celebration facing the people must have been the primitive one. Primitive means ancient. Removed it from our past. It doesn't mean stupid. Okay? Usually when we say primitive, it means ancient. Now. So facing the people must have been the primitive one. So this idea that facing the people must have been the primitive one, and that especially of the Last Supper had no other foundation than a mistaken view of what a meal could be in antiquity, Christian or not. In no meal of the early Christian era did the presiding of the banqueting assembly, the president of the banqueting assembly, ever face the other participants. It wasn't there, especially in the Jewish tradition. They were all sitting, all reclining on the convex side of a C-shaped table, all of a table having approximately the shape of a horseshoe. The other side was always left empty for the service. Nowhere in Christian antiquity would have arisen the idea of having to face the people to preside at a meal. So if a priest is presiding at a meal, facing the people, and they're claiming that this is how the ancient church celebrated the Eucharist, it's a lie. Because ancient meals were never celebrated that way. So the communal character of a meal was emphasized just by the opposite disposition. The fact that all the participants were on the same side of the table. So the table was like this. So you see, these people take advantage of our ignorance. That we don't know these things, and so they lie and lie and lie and lie. So the table was like this. And I think you see some of the other pictures of the Last Supper. So they were seated here, all here. Okay? Nobody was here facing the other ones. Okay? So the presiding Jesus was here. And this side is left for service. That's how ancient meals were celebrated. So to claim that now a priest is facing the people as a presider, okay, and they claim that that was the ancient way of celebrating the Eucharist, it wasn't there. It's a lie.
Are you familiar with the documents and apostolic constitutions written in the 2nd century?
What it's called what?
The apostolic constitutions.
Yes.
And in it describes the presider facing the people, I believe.
No.
No?
No. No. This is how it was, okay, from antiquity. But now we are talking about because this claim in the Jewish tradition, the Last Supper, specifically here we're talking about the Last Supper. Okay? So basically, we are going to get to what you are explaining there, the development. The development was the church building, then we are going to get into it. Maybe we did already, I don't know. It is It was like you had the liturgy of the word taking place in the center of a church. So there was dialogue. Okay? So the bishop or the priest was looking at the people. And then they would move to the sanctuary place area. Then the priest and people would celebrate facing one side. Okay? So that's before that the liturgy of the Eucharist. So there was a progression development. But what these people are claiming, their claim is that they're going back to the Last Supper. Okay, so that's what we are looking at here. That was not true. It was never celebrated like that. Okay? So that's why we need, to learn some of these things, because people take advantage of our lack of knowledge and we think they know what they are talking about. Okay. So in no way can the Eucharist that Christians celebrated really be adequately described by the term meal. True, the Lord established the new reality of Christian worship within the framework of a Jewish Passover meal. This is very important. Within the context of the Jewish Passover meal. But the Eucharist is not the Jewish meal, Passover meal. It is something new. You see that? The context was the meal, but the Eucharist is not the Jewish Passover meal. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anything new. Okay? So, but it was precisely this new reality, not the meal as such, that he commanded us to do. Jesus did not command the apostles to do the Jewish Passover meal, because they were doing that anyway for centuries after Egypt. So that's not what he commanded them to do. What he commanded them to do was the new reality he established within the context of the Passover meal. Okay? So very soon, the new reality was separated from its ancient context and it found its proper and suitable form. A form already predetermined by the fact that the Eucharist refers back to the cross and thus to the transformation of temple sacrifice into worship of God that is in harmony with Logos, the Word. Thus it came to pass that the synagogue liturgy of the Word, renewed and deepened in a Christian way, merged with the remembrance of Christ's death and resurrection to become the Eucharist. And precisely thus was fidelity to the command to do this fulfilled. This new and all-encompassing form of worship could not be derived simply from the meal, but had to be defined through the interconnection of temple, synagogue, word, and the sacrament, cosmos, and history. So, here basically, so let's continue this. Never and nowhere before the 16th century have we any indication that any importance or even attention was given to whether the priest celebrated with the people before him or behind him. The only thing ever insisted upon or even mentioned was that he should say the Eucharistic prayer as always.